Over the last several months, I've reviewed every MCU Phase 2 film, so to conclude those reviews, I want to take a moment to stop and rank every Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 2 movie from the worst to the best. Okay, quick disclaimer, some things that shouldn't have to be said but need to be said because the internet sucks. This is my opinion. If you disagree with my ranking, that's cool. Drop your ranking in the comments below, but don't get mad at me for disagreeing. Also, only one of these movies can be number one, so while I like 5.5 of these movies, some of them have to be in the bottom couple spots. That does not mean I hate them, it just means that there's something better than them. So now, let's hop into this ranking. Okay, in 6th place, now this is the one that I actually think is bad, we have Thor: The Dark World. This is a movie that wants to be a massive fantasy film meant to bring the success of Game of Thrones to the MCU. I mean, they even hired one of the directors of Game of Thrones to direct this movie, but the result is a pretty boring film that fails at most of the things it wants to succeed in. Thor somehow became the most boring character in his own movie, which is saying something when Jane Darcy and Eric Selvig are in this movie and are pretty prominent characters. Marvel was clearly more interested in a Loki movie than a Thor movie, which would explain why Loki steals the show in every scene he's in, from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. On top of that, the character of Jane Foster, who was a pretty well-written character in the first movie, loses everything in this movie. She becomes this uninteresting love interest to not one, but 2 men, and then she becomes just a vessel to house the ether so that way they can have something carrying the plot device for an hour and a half and not actually do anything with it while Natalie Portman gets to make out with Chris Hemsworth. And who wants the ether? Malekith. Why does Malekith want the ether? So that Thor has someone to punch. Malekith has no personality, no discernible motive. He's just evil for the sake of being evil, and so that Thor can have a punching bag. While I have said that this movie has its moments, notably the opening battle, the scene between Thor and Loki on Svartalfheim, the Siege of Asgard, and Frigga's funeral, they aren't enough to redeem this film for me, and it stands as one of the few black marks on the MCU's record. In 5th place, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. This is a weird one. I have said that this is my MCU guilty pleasure, and I think that there's a perfect Avengers movie in this movie, but it's clouded by several layers of corporate BS. Marvel wanted to set up Phase 3 while Joss Whedon just wanted to make a character-driven Avengers film, and the result is a jumbled mess of ideas that tries its best to mix everything together, but ultimately fails in executing every variable the way it wanted to. Funny enough, the trailer for this movie is actually the perfect representation of what Age of Ultron should have been.
But now I'm free. Ultron in the flesh. I was designed to save the world. People will look to the sky and see hope. I'll take that from them first.
The character moments are my favorite parts in this movie. Any character moments that don't involve Hulk and Black Widow, because that was really stupid. But for the most part, it's the character stuff outside of setup that I love the most. The scenes between Cap and Iron Man that show the beginnings of a divide, but it does it naturally instead of kind of forcing it in. I love scenes like the Will Lose will do that together too. The final moment between Vision and Ultron, that's one of my favorites in the MCU. Those scenes are the ones that work the best inside this movie. As for the character of Ultron, I liked him for the most part, but I would have preferred if he were less jokey. Every character in Age of Ultron has the exact same sense of humor, and that did unfortunately carry over to Ultron. On the positive side, Joss Whedon brought Vision to the MCU and knocked it out of the park. I still think that the Vision in this movie is the best on-screen Vision that we've ever had. I also think this film has great action, from the raid at Strucker's base, the shipping yard, the Hulkbuster fight, especially the Korea chase, and the absurd but thrilling final battle on a flying city. I love every bit of action in this film. One of the things Joss Whedon was known for before this movie came out was being able to balance a lot of characters. But something went wrong in this movie because Infinity War was able to balance 24 characters better than this movie was able to balance 10. But shout out to Hawkeye.
Doesn't matter what you did, what you were.
If you step out that door, you are an Avenger.
This movie's a mess, but it's a mess that I have an absolute blast with. Moving on to number 4, we have AntMan. AntMan is a movie that knows exactly what it wants to be, and it succeeds in being that thing. This is not trying to be the next best movie. This is just trying to be a fun popcorn flick. It's a small-scale heist movie about a burglar who was arguably just doing the right thing and now just wants to see his daughter and gets swept up into becoming a superhero in the process. And as a superhero, his mission is to prevent copyright infringement. I think this film has some great characters with solid performances across the board. It also has great action due to the limitless potential of being able to shrink from a 6-foot man to something this big in an instant, and that makes every action scene in this movie super fun. My main issues with the film lie in it having yet another boring villain, and that every scene seems to disregard the physics that were established in the scene before it. So do Ant-Man and Yellowjacket retain the same mass on their small, or not? Because the movie sure as hell doesn't give me an answer. The science in your movie doesn't have to make sense, it just has to be consistent, and in Ant-Man it is anything but consistent. Alright, bringing us into the top 3, we have Iron Man 3. This is a very underrated and overhated movie. Jon Favreau did not return to cap off the trilogy, so Marvel hired director Shane Black to do Iron Man 3. He chose to do a character study on Tony Stark, showing his PTSD after he flew a nuke through space into an alien spaceship. And I feel like a big issue that people have with this movie is that he's not Iron Man enough in it, which is the stupidest argument because 1, there's just as much Iron Man armor action in this movie as there is in 1 and 2, plus you get a battle where it's just an army of Iron Men against an army of just fire-breathing soldiers. What's not to love there? And secondly, listen to this quote from Spider-Man Homecoming.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
The suit is not Iron Man, Tony Stark is Iron Man. If not having your main item means that you aren't that particular hero, then that means Thor is not Thor throughout the entirety of Thor Ragnarok. Captain America is not Captain America after he drops his shield in the final fight of Winter Soldier, and that means that Spider-Man is not Spider-Man after Tony takes his suit away. Find something else to complain about. Like the Mandarin twist, which 8 years later still leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And the worst part is that the final reveal of who the Mandarin is falls flat because Killian's not a particularly great villain either, and is also not surprising because it was pretty clear from the first scene of the movie that Killian was the true mastermind, not the Mandarin. And even though Shang-Chi saved the Mandarin, this twist still feels like an absolutely awful decision. Moving on, our runner-up is Captain America the Winter Soldier. Anthony and Joe Russo pumped the steroids into the Captain America franchise by making it into a spy thriller. They decided to go gritty with the character and they said, how do we make Captain America cool? Well, the solution is to make this movie. We got Captain America trying to fit into the world. He's taken issue with the organization that the love of his life helped to create. Something that I actually wish the movie put more emphasis on, now that I'm thinking about it. Then he has to go on the run. It's absolutely perfect. And oh yeah, His best friend is the villain. Hydra's takeover of S.H.I.E.L.D. was executed perfectly, both in-universe and from a storytelling standpoint. The movie also introduces Falcon and makes Black Widow a main character, but neither of them ever get to overshadow Captain America in his own movie. Also, the movie gave us this gem. My only real issue with the film is that I can't ever see a scenario where Nick Fury would think that Project Insight is a good idea. It's not my favorite film, but it's certainly a spectacular one. But in first place, our winner is Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn not only made the best Phase 2 film, but one of the best MCU films. He took a group of relatively unknown characters and made them both household names and fan favorites. He poured his heart and soul into this film, and it shows. Every character in this movie is fantastic. Even now, 7 years later, I'm still in awe over the fact that James Gunn made a talking tree the biggest sweetheart in the galaxy and made us all cry with this line.
We are Groot.
I also think that the central story of the film is among the best, maybe even the best that we've gotten in the MCU. And I love how every character, every story, every little plot thread is knitted together so perfectly, and it's all relevant, and luckily all of it works. This isn't like The Phantom Menace, where some things don't work but you can't cut it because it's all tightly wound together. In this movie, every one of those plot lines works. The movie also manages to balance comedy and drama really well. The movie starts with a kid watching his mom die, then gets abducted by aliens a minute later, but then the next scene, the movie segues into this. And it works, and this is something that the film does consistently well. Despite having two wildly different tones, they both work and never feel like they're competing for attention. I also feel like I should address the soundtrack because for some reason I didn't mention it in my review, but this film does have one of the best soundtracks of all time. And I can't listen to a single one of these songs without thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy. My real main issue is the villains. Ronan falls flat as a villain. I think he's another bad Marvel villain, but the rest of the film is so good that Ronan does not bring it down. There you guys go. That is my ranking of all 6 MCU Phase 2 films. I will begin the Phase 3 reviews in a few weeks, and that will take me into 2020. Holy crap, it's almost 2022 already. So what did you guys think of my list? Leave your ranking down in the comments below. Also leave a like on this video, subscribe, and click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from the MCU HQ. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.